So you can stay standing. Listen, it's been an incredible Christmas, right? We've had a lot going on this season, right? We had Here Comes Heaven, that sermon series. That help anybody in here? Okay. Everybody's like, well, sure. Yeah, I remember that. All right, Christmas Eve. We had our Christmas Eve services, which were awesome, right? So it's been an awesome time. We've thrown everything at you. You've heard from every pastor on our staff pretty much in this Christmas series. And last week we were reminded that Christmas is not a one-time event, but it's actually this 2,000-year covenant that God made with Abram, and 4,000 years after that covenant, he still is pursuing us, right? He still pursues us. And I think it's great that we're standing this morning. We're going to get into the Word in a moment, and I think when we stand for Scripture, it gives reverence. It helps us connect. It helps us really get intentional. It helps us really listen in and lean in for what God has for us today. And today we're going to go a little more practical and talk about 2019 and all the things that come along with that. So let's dive into Matthew chapter 26, verse 36. It says, "Then Jesus went with his disciples to a garden called Gethsemane, and he said to them, 'Sit here while I go over there and pray.' He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him." So the two sons are James and John. So he took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell on his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Isn't that the hardest thing to do, right? It's not always hard at the beginning of a scenario, and it's not always hard at the end when we're able to look back, but when you're in the middle of something, when you're in the middle of the moment, it's so difficult to say, "Not as I will, but as you will." And then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." I love that line. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." Notice he's going back for a second time and saying the exact same thing. Some of us in here are giving up on our prayers because we've already said it once to God. But can I just tell you this morning that God wants you to keep coming to him? He wants you to keep being obedient to him. It's okay if you're saying the same thing over and over and over. It's modeled right here for us by Jesus. And when he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more to pray for a third time, saying the same thing. And then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." This 3 times Jesus prayed about this cup, this cup. Man, what's the deal? What's the deal with this cup, right? Let me give you some context on this cup. See, in biblical antiquity, whenever they wanted to kill a king, they would poison the king's drink. They would put poison in the cup, so the king would actually have a cupbearer. Like, how would you like to have that job? Your job is to drink the king's cup and make sure there's not poison in it. So if you're really good at your job, you'll die. Isn't that awesome? And so the point of the poison is that the king would drink it unknowingly, and then the king would be dead. But what is to be said of a king who would drink a cup with poison in it? Knowing poison is in the cup, that king must be confident in the fact that death will not have the final say in his life. If you know there's poison in the cup and you drink it anyway, you must be confident under pressure. Confident under pressure. That's what I want to preach about this morning. I want to talk to you about cup. I want you to learn about confidence under pressure. If you believe God's going to speak something to you this morning, will you just give him some praise for a moment? Can we do that? You can go ahead and find your seats. Thank you so much again for being here. Listen, I've preached on this text before. This is becoming one of my favorite, if not my favorite, verse in the Bible. And this past summer, we talked about you can get there from here. Some of you remember this back in like June or July. And we talked about how when Jesus went with Peter, James, and John and then went a little further, that was the depiction of the outer court, the inner court, and the Holy of Holies. And I was sitting with one of our pastors on staff, Jim Estep, at lunch about a month ago, and we were talking about this passage in Matthew, and we were discussing our church and this cup and a few different aspects of this passage. And in speaking to him, God was like, this is it. Like, as clear as I'm talking to you, he was like, this is it. This is what you're going to share on December 30th. This is going to be for someone. And so I'm thankful to work with people that are so talented and gifted and wise that a conversation can turn into a message over the time that it takes to consume a burger, right? So it's pretty awesome. Are you confident under pressure? There's a movie called The King's Speech, where an English actor, Colin Firth, portrays a life of King George VI, who in the 1930s desperately did not want to be king of the United Kingdom, but suddenly he was pushed into the position by purpose, and the weight of that public position exposed a private battle with a stutter that would occur anytime he was about to give a speech. And there's this opening scene where he's walking down the corridor and he's standing in front of the microphone, and his lips are parched and his palms are sweaty and his heart is pounding, and the crowd turns with anticipation to see what he's going to say, and you can just see the fear in his eyes. And that's how every pastor feels on a Sunday morning. We hide it well, but that's the reality. The difference between standing up here and sitting out there is pressure. If you don't believe me, let me announce right now that you're going to speak next Sunday. And let's see how hard your heart starts beating. The number one fear in the world is not death, it is public speaking. And when you stand up on a stage and declare that you're a pastor and that you are going to communicate the inspired word of God, what you are saying is that you have spent time in the presence of God. You have held your ear to the heartbeat of heaven so that when you open your mouth, you're not saying what you want to say, but you're speaking on behalf of the almighty, all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipotent, holy God. Man, that's pressure. Now, don't leave the message early today, because I don't want you to think that I just got up here and started complaining about my calling. That's not what I'm doing. But what I'm saying is that while I think that maybe there are some of us in here that can't identify with the whole pastor thing, you can probably identify with the pressure. Do you feel like you're under pressure? Pressure to perform? Pressure to please people? Pressure to meet other people's expectations, pressure to meet other people's unrealistic expectations, pressure to meet your own expectations, pressure to be a good parent, pressure to be a good spouse. Pressure can come from all kinds of places. Pressure to post the perfect pic on Instagram. Pressure to be a good friend. Pressure to get married. Pressure to have kids. Pressure to have a divorce. Does anybody know what it's like to feel pressure, financial obligations, drop bad habits, beat addictions, overcome depression? See, pressure is not prejudiced, and pressure is not racist. Pressure will find you wherever you are. There's no age range, there's no tax bracket that can keep you from pressure. And this is an important topic to preach on because of the season we are in as a church. Some would say that we are under pressure. And if you've been here a while, you might be feeling that, but it's important for us not to lose our confidence. Understand that the enemy cannot touch your calling. He can't touch your calling, but he can touch your confidence. And man, if he gets your confidence, you'll never reach your calling. So what I'm telling you today is that wherever you're headed, whatever your calling is that the tool that the enemy is going to use to try to mess up that calling is your confidence. And honestly, you don't really know if you have confidence until you're under pressure. I mean, look at sports, right? Look at sports. You can be good at sports, but until you're great and consistent under pressure, you aren't known for anything. Take Georgia, for example. That wasn't even in my notes. I just came to me. Like, let's say you're good at golf. A lot of us in here are good at golf, all right? I loop myself into that, all right? Hopefully you can make a 20-foot putt. Because to be good at golf, you got to make a 20-foot putt. But can you make a 20-foot putt when all your boys are standing around watching you and lunch is on the line? So to be in the NFL, you have to be able to be a kicker in the NFL, you have to be able to hit a 40-yard field goal pretty consistently. 42 or less. I mean, look, man, if you're kicking a 42 or less yard field goal, you should make it every time. But can you make it when there's 2 seconds on the clock and it's do or die? The greatest players of all time are great under pressure. Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady. Let's see, we're in Georgia. John Smoltz, okay? I know you can be excited about your marriage when your kids are well behaved. And you can be excited about your marriage when you just got a raise at work and the house is clean and, your sex life is great and all that stuff. But can you be excited about your marriage when you lose your job? The money's tight. Your kids are teenagers. Like, I know you can worship when your body is healthy and you feel no pain, but can you worship when the cancer is spreading? Can you worship when your relationships around you are deteriorating? When life is throwing everything negative it has at you, can you worship then? What faith will you have when facing a fiery furnace? Will you be like the Hebrew boys and say with confidence that God will deliver us, God can deliver us, and even if he doesn't deliver us, I'm not going to bow down to anything other than Christ because my praise is not predicated on the pressure you put on me? In fact, could it be that the pressure is producing something new in me? How can I have confidence under pressure? I think that pressure mounts up for believers more than any other kind of people, because the reality is we have an enemy. You were born in the image of Christ, therefore you're on the hit list of hell. And I also think pressure mounts up for believers because we always got to act like we have it together. Like we always have to act like we've never had a bad day. I mean, it kind of looks like Sunday mornings. But it's okay for us to admit that sometimes we're not doing well. Like, it's okay for us to be vulnerable. It's okay for us to reach out to others for help or guidance. Some of the best decisions I've made in my personal life have been because I've reached out to others for help and guidance. Understand that the pressure of life coupled with the pressure of trying to pretend that everything is okay, that's going to cause you to explode or implode. I'll say that again. The pressure of life coupled with the pressure of trying to pretend that everything is okay, that will cause you to explode or implode. For those of you that know me pretty well, you know that I love cars, right? I love vehicles, automobiles, classics, new, European. I love vehicles. My wife catches me marveling at the look of a vehicle from time to time. I really enjoy, not just the look of the vehicle, but the progression in technology and all the fun little gadgets that it comes with. And every car made since 2007 comes with this safety feature called TPMS. And this is Tire Pressure Monitoring System. Congress signed off on this because back in the 90s, some of you remember the whole Firestone fiasco where literally tires were just exploding and people were getting in wrecks and some people lost their lives and it was just awful. And so now there's TPMS on every car from 2007 on. And so a lot of people think that a tire is like a balloon and that if there's too much pressure, well, obviously, naturally, it pops. But it's actually the opposite. What causes a blowout is when there's not enough pressure in the tire. So when the weight of what you're carrying cannot be balanced with the pressure that's on the tire, you have a blowout. And interestingly enough, that's the definition of burnout. When what is required of you takes more than the resources that are provided for you, you get burnout. And so this creates a paradox of pressure. Lots of P's in my message today. This creates a paradox of pressure because too much pressure will keep me from where I'm going, and too little pressure will keep me from where I'm going. So the challenge is to maintain the correct amount of pressure. Some of us are having trouble getting where we need to go because we have too much weight on us and we don't have the resources to handle the weight. But could it be that some of us in here are not getting to where we go because we're too comfortable? Life's a little casual, easy. Is it possible we're not getting to where God wants us to be because we don't have a healthy amount of pressure? Understand that there's power in pressure, because power in pressure comes through the fact that you'll learn how to pray when you're under pressure. You'll learn how to worship when you're under pressure. You'll learn to be humble. You'll learn to be empathetic and not judge others. If you don't believe me, the next time you're on a flight, tell the pilot not to pressurize the cabin and see what his reaction is. See, a flight can't get to a certain place in the sky without the cabin being pressurized. So if you're planning to ascend and get to the next level, you might want to realize that pressure is going to come with that. And TPMS, that lets you know when there's too little pressure in your tires. Unfortunately, it doesn't let you know when there's too much. So how do we know, right? Like, have you ever felt like pressure was just, man, it's just too much to bear, right? Like, I can't handle this. What do? Well, if we look at the Apostle Paul, we see a candid moment in Corinthians when the pressure was getting to be too much. If you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 1, and I'm moving kind of fast, so I'm going to put it up on the side screens for those that aren't there. But 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8 says, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters. That's really just a fancy way of saying, like, don't get it twisted. Like, don't get it twisted, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. And indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But, everyone say but. You just said but in church. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us. Like we sang today, right? Like, he has delivered us from such a deadly peril. He will deliver us again. Will you meet me here again? It's the same concept. So if the Apostle Paul and Jesus felt pressure, then it really doesn't matter how righteous or gifted you think you are. You're going to feel pressure. And society's going to tell you to cope, right? Just cope. Just get through it, man. Like, figure out a way that you can, like, let all your stuff out, right? Maybe it's lifting weights. Maybe it's like drinking. Maybe it's like smoking. Maybe it's like having sex. Maybe it's like going out and partying. Like, just cope and deal with the pressure. But can you be confident under pressure? I want to give you 4 things that you have to have if you're going to be confident under pressure. And I want you to write these points down, or at least pretend to write them down so that I feel like I'm getting my point across. That would be really good. Put them on your phone if you don't have a pen. Here's the deal. We can come in on a Sunday morning and we can, like, hear what God has for us, and that's great. Like, you know, sometimes that's just the mood we're in. We come in, we're like, great, you know, check that off the list, and we'll keep going. But can we listen and write down and put into action what God has called for us to do? Because the fact is, if you come in with surface level expectations, you're going to live a very surface level Christian life. So let's write these points down. I've got 4 points, 4 principles here. And the first one is preview. Preview. God gives us a preview of our promise. Sometimes it comes a long time away from the premiere day, but there's always a preview that we can hold on to. So when a movie comes out, right, when a new movie comes out, there's usually like 3 trailers that go with that movie. And the first one is just really to make you aware that something is coming. Like, have you guys seen some of these trailers for movies that are in like 2020 or like fall of 2019? It's like, dude, that's a year away. It's just to let you know something is coming. And then the ones to follow build anticipation and pressure leading up to the moment when the movie is finally released. So when God shows us a preview of our promise, we have to hold on to the preview. We have to know that if we've seen that this promise is coming, God will follow through. We have to trust through the pressure that mounts inside of our impatient selves. A lot of times when you feel that pressure, just so you know, a little side note, when you feel that pressure mounting up, a lot of times that's God teaching you patience. He doesn't work on our schedule. We work on his. He's teaching us patience. And we could go through the Bible and look at all the previews that people were given. You have Abraham and Sarah. You're going to have a baby. Long time passes, then they have a baby. Joseph, I'm going to make you the ruler, and your brothers will bow down to you. But Joseph had to go to prison first. And man, when you're in prison, the only thing you have to hold on to is the preview. And some of you are in here and you're between that stage of preview and promise. And I'm just telling you, you've got to hold on to the preview. God's going to follow through. So first principle is preview. Second principle is place. Man, you need a place. You need a place where you can connect with God and God can connect with you. The place is usually where you get the preview in the first place, in God's presence. So let me show you this in Scripture. If you look at the accounts of the Garden of Gethsemane that we talked about earlier, in Matthew and Mark, it would seem that Jesus just kind of like stumbled into this garden. Like he was like, this is a lot of pressure. I got to get to the Garden of Gethsemane and pray. But if you look at Luke's account, you'll see something slightly different, and it's pretty important. It's Luke chapter 22. It says, Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and prayed, "Father, if you are..." Did you already miss it? Did you miss it already? Look at the top. Jesus went out what? As usual. Well, as usual. So, in other words, this wasn't the first time that Jesus had prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. This was like his place. He had been there to pray before. So Jesus is not letting the pressure mount up and then that pressure push him to a place. He already has a regular place where he can connect with the Father so that when the pressure mounts up, he's ready. You need a place. Don't wait for the pressure to come. Find your place where God can fill you up before the pressure builds up. Some of us are kind of like those 911 Christians. You know what I mean? Like we have that 911 kind of faith where it's like, man, I'm going to do everything I can to fix this problem. Okay, I can't fix it. God, listen, man, I can't fix it. I've done everything I can on my own power. And that faith is, that's great. I'm glad that you're going through that. But there's a big difference in Psalm 91 or Psalm 91:1 faith and 911 faith. Like Psalm 91:1 says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High shall rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, in whom I shall trust." So you need a place, and you need to get there before the pressure mounts up. Preview. Place. The third one is people. People. You notice in the story that Jesus takes Peter, James, and John a little further away from the group and confides in them. You can't spell confidence without confide. All right? As the pressure gets greater, here's the deal. As the pressure gets greater, your circle needs to get smaller. Your circle needs to get smaller. And this is why we have life groups. We believe that Jesus has shown us that when the pressure mounts up inside of us, it becomes too much to bear, and prayer and people we can trust to confide in, they are needed. So when you're under pressure, a lot of times you're just not yourself. You might say some things that you regret. You might do some things that you regret, and so you don't want your audience to be all these people. You need to get with people that you can trust and get around the right people in your life. So we've got preview, we've got place, we've got people. One more principle, and that's going to be power. Power. When you're under pressure, you need the right people around you. But man, ultimately, that's not where your power comes from. God never wants you to put power into other people's hands. Man, so when the disciples were falling asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane, remember he went and prayed, comes back, they're asleep. He went and prayed a second time, he comes back, they're asleep. He went and prayed a third time, they come back. Man, that is a depiction of humanity. People are going to let you down. So don't put all your trust and all your faith in people, your hope in people. You have to have another source, and that source is God. Jesus knew where his power came from. And if we look back at Luke 22, and only Luke says this, and I want you to see something. I never saw this, but I was reading it in preparation for this message, and I'm telling you, this is so absolutely cool. Luke 22, verse 42, it says, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened. Like, where was this in the Passion of the Christ movie? Like, I'm kind of mad. Like, Mel Gibson, let me holler at you. Like, that's messed up. An angel of strength appeared to Jesus. How did I miss this? Like, how did I miss this? And then we see that Jesus began sweating, sweat falling to the ground like drops of blood. And so see, as Christians and as churches, so many times we get caught up like I did. We look at the pressure, the anguish, and we totally miss the moment that the angel came. So many times we're under so much pressure, we're focused on the weight, and we fail to recognize that we're still standing. We are still here. We can still be strong. Man, we got to change our perspective. Don't just look at the sweat, man. You need to look at the strength that God has given you. This is where our power comes from. And as many times as I've read this, I cannot believe that I missed the angel. Preview, place, people, power. So you have a choice as an individual. And right now, dare I say, we have a choice as a church heading into 2019. It's a new year, right? We can set our eyes on a couple different things. We can set our eyes on the pressure, the past, the struggles, the weight. Or we can choose to fix our eyes on something greater and believe that God has shown us a preview and has brought us into the right position and place and surrounded us with the right people and will provide the power to get to our promise.